And what are people going to say has led many people down some really dark roads. People are going to say anything they're going to say. So you have to decide, okay, is this how I want to live? Because the same people who would say something, if you didn't say them, like, oh, but why didn't you say something? Right? People are not thinking about you that deeply.
Yeah.
People are really, for the most part, busy with their own lives.
Welcome to Journey of the Art, where we discuss the artist, unravel the art, and explore the road between. Hello, and welcome once again to Journey of the Arts. Today, I'm joined by award-winning author Yejide Kilanko to discuss her latest work, In Our Own Ways, a novel about male infertility and the extent one man will go to preserve his reputation. The novel is about a well-to-do couple, Fadaka and Senami, who miraculously have a child after about 5 years of waiting. Well, the problem begins when the lady, Fadaka, starts having nightmares during pregnancy and learns from their family doctor that she should not, in fact, have been able to have her child. Eventually, she finds out how she got pregnant, and this leads to the end of the marriage and a host of other problems. My guest and author of In Our Own Ways is a lover of words and music. She writes novels, short fiction, poetry, and children's picture books. She's the author of Daughters Who Walk This Path. And fun fact, she was born in the beautiful city of Ibadan, Nigeria, and now lives in Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Yejide.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
I'm still very excited to have another Ibadan person on the show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, I'm an Ibadan girl. The last person I had on the show who was an Ibadan indigene is Adidayo Agaro, the poet. So it's always nice. I think Ibadan people write the best literature, but I may be biased.
Just a little.
Just a little. Okay, so before we begin this conversation today, I just want to share another reminder to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you're watching the show, or follow the show if you're listening to us today. It really, really makes a difference. Okay, so I want to begin this conversation. First of all, I'm going to show the book, as I always do. A beautiful cover, In Our Own Ways, by Yejide Kilanko, out by Narrative Landscape Press. And I really want us to begin with something that we have in common. I discovered that you started playing the guitar 10 years after you bought one. And it's really quite similar to the story of how I began to play the guitar. I bought a guitar and I left it in my closet for about 2 years. And then finally I was like, okay, I need to go and find someone to teach me how to play the guitar. And I've been learning since then and growing since then. So I was curious to know, how is that going for you? Do you still play?
Well, I have not. I fell off the guitar playing wagon. I think part of it was because I've had some kind of vision issues, and so I really can't see the strings properly. So I've really been struggling. My son picked it up actually, and so I'm like, well, maybe he's going to be the guitar player in the family.
Yeah.
So he's there playing, messing around with the guitar now. So yeah, so that was really what my problem was. I was having a hard time really singing it, and so but in my head, I play the guitar beautifully. Like I can picture myself on stage. I can picture myself on a stage somewhere playing bass guitar. Like
yeah. What kind of guitar did you have? A bass guitar?
No, it was just an acoustic
An
one.
acoustic, okay.
Yeah,
I have an
just
acoustic as well.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, the strings are, especially the last three, or the first three, as they say, they're very tiny, and then you have to pinch down so that your music rings, real loud. So yeah, I get that. But yeah, another fun fact about you is that you play the guitar. Okay, so we're talking about the book now. I particularly appreciate the fact that you situated the story within a rich family where money is not a problem, right? They could have gone and, they could afford IVF, or, got a surrogate mother to carry the pregnancy, or adopted a child. So this challenge of infertility that not Yejide, that Fadaka and Senami had, becomes an avenue to see the true nature of the people, the characters that are involved when a problem such as this, came their way. Can you share a bit about this approach to remove money away from this problem of infertility and just situate it within the context of the character of the people that are involved in it?
I think the focus then fix how it's the impact of culture,
Mm,
right, of how within that, even though money was, they had other options, but just that impact of culture in shaping how we approach things, how we navigate life, even when we have the means, the financial means to address a problem, to
right.
address an issue or whatever it is. So I think that was it in terms of how much our culture shapes everything about us, and good or bad.
Right.
And so I think that was a piece that I wanted to like highlight in terms of just that piece of the culture piece. Whether it doesn't matter whether someone is educated, whether they're rich, if they're not really paying attention to the parts of the culture that they're subscribing to, and or learning and unlearning, how it can really impact their life.
Right. I really like that connection that you talked about, the culture, because at the end of the day, that culture is really what determines how both people, especially Senami, respond to the problem. And going back to Senami, to give us a sense of where Senami is coming from, the story begins with poverty and the death of Sanami's mother. Sanami's mother falls ill, and Sanami's father, who is not a very literate man, doesn't seek medical care because he doesn't believe in Western medicine. Like, he wouldn't even vaccinate, he wouldn't allow his children to be vaccinated. And as Sanami's mother dies, she hands him over to her friend, Auntie Kike, who makes a promise to raise him as her own child. But when it matters the most, Auntie Kike, leads Sanami astray. And I was just thinking about this influence of foster parents on children and that connection that they still have to their biological children, because we still see Sanami holding, memories of his mother and things that, some of her property that he still had. But as a therapist in this conversation, in children's mental health, can you talk about the dynamics of this influence that foster parents have over their adopted children?
Yeah, so I think it's adults have over children, period, like in terms of whether and especially in their formative years, and that's why it's really important that children have the best support around them when they're growing up,
Mhm.
right? And so, like, and if you have a good teacher, you have a good coach, if you have all those people kind of shape your life. And we I was talking having a conversation yesterday about how for we've all talked about it takes a village to raise a child. And because there's some things that maybe there's a particular adult in that child's life who's lacking something, then another adult is able to fill that gap.
Mm,
And now that we no longer have villages raising children, and it's very more like people, and that's why we're having so many problems. And
right.
that's what meant, having solid adults in a child life still really, really matters. Whether, it's, back in Africa or at home or anywhere, a child needs a circle of people who think that they're really important and who are investing in their life. So I think, yeah, so foster parents, aunts, uncles, any adult, they have a big role to play in any child's life.
Right, right. And we do see that that influence, and I think that there were other people that Sanami could have turned to, but Auntie Kika did have a strong hold on him. She um even when the choices that he made as a result of her counsel was leading to a terrible place, he still continued on that path. And it wasn't until much later that we start to see some remorse in the decisions that he made. And it just again goes back to that piece, that culture piece that you were talking about, and what is expected of someone who is wealthy, what's expected of someone who is a man, what's expected of someone who is married, all of these cultural expectations. And the book is set among the wealthy, as I pointed out earlier on. And the other aspect of this story that is really, really upsetting is Fadaka's parents' reaction when they find out what really happened and how she really truly got pregnant. And they would not believe her, right? They wouldn't believe her own story. They believed Senami's story because, again, that cultural aspect. He's your husband, and surely he cannot be making up these things, these lies against you. Surely you're the one who is, deranged, and you're the one who's suffering postpartum depression, and all of these things. And immediately, we it wasn't until much later that we start to see them come to this point where they believed that she was telling the truth. And their response really is, no one must know. How do we explain this when they find out that she was indeed telling the truth? Why was it important for you to touch on this aspect of shaming and covering of shame in our culture?
Yeah, because it's such a very deep, like it's very entrenched in the way, we deal with things, whether it's, sexual abuse, it's domestic violence, it's divorce, it's anything. We're like, shh, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, what are people going to say? And what are people going to say has led many people down some really dark, dark roads. People are going to say anything they're going to say. So you have to decide, okay, is this how I want to live? Because the same people who would say something, if you didn't say them, like, oh, but why didn't you say something? Right? People are not thinking about you that deeply. And I think that's the thing that people think, oh, people are really, for the most part, busy with their own lives. So they're not really just thinking about you all the time, about your life all the time. So you have to be able to, and that sentence of has killed many people because they've stayed in situations where they shouldn't have stayed.
Yeah.
They haven't made decisions and so much regret about their lives because of what will people say. And so it's such a and it's been all my life. I'm 50 something now. That's what that what would people say.
Yeah.
Growing up in Nigeria has just been something I've heard all the time, like, no, we can't say it. Oh, we have to keep it quiet. Oh, what would people say? Or if people find out, maybe somebody did something to the family that, oh, it's going to affect you when you want to go get married.
Yeah.
They're going to look at our entire family. So that piece of shaming and guilting and all that just keeps people trapped, really.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why I like how Fadaka responds. Initially, I think she does go through some anger and some shame, but ultimately she decides that what people think is no longer as important as me making this connection and finding, this individual. I don't want to spoil it too much because I already spoiled it a little bit, but trying not to give the story away here. But it's I think it's an important journey that Fadaka then has to make when she comes to a point where she realizes that nobody's going to save you if you join them in the covering of this shame, and you have to begin your own journey to discover the truth and confront some of the things that have happened to you. But when we talk about confronting the things that happened, to her, the other thing about this story that was really deep, I found deeply upsetting, is the legal system and the way that it put the burden of proof, or the way that it puts the burden of proof on the victims of assault. And I assume that in writing this book, you turn to the legal system to see what options your characters had, and how could they find their way out of this mess. And unfortunately, Fadaka had little to no favorable options. That she's eventually faced with this question: what do I do when the law is not on my side? And I think that that's the question that a lot of people eventually come to, and maybe that's why there's this culture of covering the shame, because the law is not on your side. And what do you do? And then ultimately she lands on a solution that the law cannot provide, and she has to go out of the law to find that solution. How did you feel when you're writing this portion of the book?
So I think that's what kind of lends to the title of the book, In Our Own Ways. That we deal with things in our own ways, because you're right. Sometimes someone say, oh, why didn't they just go to court? Why didn't they just do this? Because when I would talk to some of my Canadian friends, I'm like, well, because we don't have systems like that.
Yeah.
And even I would say in Canada, you still have the burden of proof.
Yeah.
right? Because we still have a lot of people who do not come forward when there's, cases like that, because they still have the burden is on them to prove that it happened. And so it's not just in our own, back in Nigeria, it's everywhere,
Mm.
where the victim is the one who has that burden of proof. And so then, and reading through the book, it was showing how do you respond to situations in a system that is not built for you,
Yeah.
in a system that does not address your needs, that does not protect you. And so you have to figure things in your own ways. And it may not make sense to somebody else, but that's okay, because you have to look at what, I'm a very what's pragmatic person in just my own life. Like, okay, this has happened, then what? What are my options? What else can I do? Because sometimes, what would look like the best option may not be available to me, or the
Mm.
best response, right? So I think that that's just showing that, you have to figure out how am I going to address my issues in my own way, which may not make sense to somebody
Right. Right. I think it's a very dire picture that you paint here, where people are just, they're their own saviors at the end of the day.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the help of others. I'm very big on community, because you truly can't do it alone,
Mm.
right? You have to find your own people. You have to find community. So not necessarily. There's some journey you have to walk out on your own, but you also need people to help you along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking about community, you just preempted my next question. Um, the book has an overall theme of people searching for something or someone. And I specifically want us to talk in this moment about the wives of the soldiers who have been deployed to curb the insurgency in the northern part of the country. And this is a people group that we don't necessarily think about. When we hear about the insurgency and the horrific attacks, particularly in the northern part of Nigeria, the focus is on the victims, and rightly so, right? But we hardly hear about the wives of the soldiers whose boots are on the ground to combat this insurgency. Why was it important for you to include these women in the story?
I think I grew up during the time of, when we had military dictators in Nigeria. And I remember when Abacha was the head of state. And when, my dad was a university professor at University of Ibadan. And we were, they were on strike, and they said they were going to deploy soldiers to come and ask all the university professors to leave the campus and everything. And my parents were like, they sent my sisters to go stay with my auntie because I wasn't sure. So I grew up with and growing up, when during those times, I grew up with a fear of
Mm.
the military, right? Of harm, like armed forces, guns, and things like that. And I never, there was something I realized one day, that I would see their gun and I didn't see their humanity,
Mm.
because they didn't really portray themselves as human, right? So you just see them, they come in and they just do whatever, and nothing happened to them. And so it was just at that time when everything was going on that it actually struck me that there were other humans attached, that, if they were being deployed, sometimes they had no choice.
Mm.
They had no choice to go fight those wars that they didn't create. And there were people at home waiting for them who never knew what happened to them. And I think what actually happened, that actually, while this book was being written, we had a family member who was in the police force and who was killed during one of those, what I call it, campaigns against Boko Haram. And our family had to go find him.
Mm.
And that really struck me, right? Because I knew this person, and I knew how much pain it was to go find and bring him home. And so I think that, just because you can separate yourself for some things, but then when it becomes personal, then it just struck me like, oh my God, this is what other people have to experience and I've been experiencing for years.
Yeah.
And so that was why it was really important to me, in that, because like this book took a while to write. And so as I'm living life and the book is evolving, it's kind of also reflecting the experiences I'm going through as a writer.
Mm.
And so I think that was part of why I had to put that in there, because then they became really real to me.
Mm.
That there were families behind who were just waiting, and nobody really said anything about them. Like you said, we don't talk about them,
Yeah.
right? Nobody's still okay, So we just, oh yeah, they raided this army barracks and this number of soldiers were killed, and that's it.
Yeah.
We don't say anything about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that I really loved about you mentioning them was you didn't mention them as you didn't write about them as victims, but as victors in a sense, because they have this community of sisterhood, this sisterhood that looks out for one another. And when one person has, some sort of mental breakdown, they all come together and support that person. And then there's an elderly woman, I forget her name now, that they look to, who is a, it's almost like an MI6. Where the front is the front of the house is a charity organization, and the back of the house is like an MI6 with really
Mama
providing,
Dengi. Her name is Mama Dengi.
yeah, supporting these women and helping them to navigate very harsh circumstances. So thank you, I think, for honoring their legacy and their struggles. As I finished reading this book, I thought I should ask you, what are some things that you left out that didn't make the book?
Hmm. What are some things I left out? I think because it took me such a long time to write it. I don't think that I think because on initially the book is actually it was a manuscript that I started like 15 how many years ago now? So 2010. Yeah, so about almost 15 years ago,
Wow.
that became 3 books. And so that became my novella, Chasing Butterflies, my second novel, A Good Name, and this book. So I
Right.
think I had so much time with those characters that I feel I said everything I needed to say.
Mhm.
And so and normally I'm really pleased with my work. I'm my own worst critic. But I think with this book I'm like, okay, I've said everything I needed to say.
Mhm.
So I felt like I was done. By the time I got to the last page, I was like, okay, you said everything you did to say.
That's so good.
Yeah. So I think, and I didn't until the book was actually printed, I realized how large it was. I was like, I didn't realize even I didn't have this idea that it was this big. I was like, oh, okay, because I think I just yeah. So I think I said everything that I needed to say.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing because people usually, when I ask this question, they usually say, "Oh, there's a fragment here that I wish that I explored, and maybe I'll explore that in another book." But I think that's so nice that this idea came, and you've executed it in manifold ways, like your novella, and then your second novel, and then this one. So that's amazing. And speaking of the different types of things that you've written, I want to ask a bit about your journey writing this book. Were there any challenges that you faced writing and publishing? You did say that it took about 15 years.
Okay. So let me see. So the story actually started October 2010. Yeah, so 2010. So then I was just still working on my first book, my first novel, and so I needed a break from it because it's also a heavy topic, and so I stayed writing this manuscript, and let me see, 20. So fast forward, I worked on it. I got a publishing deal for it. And then fast forward to 2013, I felt sick. I had cancer, and I was at that point, the editor said, you know what, go do your treatments, come back, and when you're done. But by the time I was a year after, by the time I'd finished my treatment, she was no longer at the agent at the publishing house,
Mm.
and so the deal fell apart. And so I lost the publishing deal. And I was still, of course, I had done cancer, my treatments were done, but I'm still dealing with stuff. And in that process, I lost my agent. And so there was just a lot of losses along the way.
Wow.
And I remember coming to Nigeria in 2014 for Ake Book Festival and having a conversation with another writer. And she said, you know what? So I said, so like, oh, what are you doing? Right? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I feel like I'm stuck. And I have this manuscript that's huge. I don't know what to do with it. And she said, how about you divide it up? Think
Mm.
about it that way. And so he really encouraged me to do that. And I can give him a shout out. That's Victor Cameno. I think he's just a fantastic human. And so Victor was like, go ahead and do that. And that really changed. And he was so kind. He actually made the cover of the very first cover for Chasing Butterflies. He was his art. I don't know if you know Victor. And
Yeah, I can put a
so
picture of.
yeah. And so yeah, so he did and that was it for me. I just had to sit back and really like, okay, where am I going? And sometimes you have this dream about where your journey is going to go as a writer, and life happens,
Mm.
and life happens in the midst of that. So this book has really gone through, evolved in so many ways. And eventually I was able to publish A Good Name in Nigeria, which was a second word narrative landscape. And then I told them I have this other manuscript, and they read it, they liked it. And so it's really taken that long until it was published last year.
Mm.
So that's why I said the journey, it was from 2010 to 2025. And just yeah, so it was just, so I think, but in a way, in hindsight now, I'm grateful for that journey, because I think the book is better for it, because not only did I grow as a human being, grow as a writer, I think the book is better for having gone through that, because I had to make a decision and say, okay, if I didn't get any more publishing deals, if I didn't have an agent, if I had nothing, will I continue to create art? Would I continue to write? And I had to come to that conclusion, like, yes, I will, because that's such a big part of who I am. And so yeah. So I don't know if I think I've answered your
Yes,
question.
you did. You certainly did. And I was just going to say, you did it your way, in your own way. Yeah.
In my own ways. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so one of the other fascinating things about you is that you're a multidisciplinary writer. So you write poetry, short fiction, children's books. If you had to pick one, which one would you pick and why?
It's like saying, if I have three children, you say I have to pick one of them. It's very hard. I don't think I can, to be honest. I started writing poetry first,
Yeah.
because I started writing when I was 12. And poetry is usually, I don't, that's one of, I would say it's the most organic for me, in the sense that I don't think it. Like I just
Mhm.
like I just I'm watching something, and I feel this ball of emotions in my heart, and I'm like, oh, I need to untangle it, and then I write. So I don't plan it. I don't.
Right.
That's why I haven't published my poetry, because I don't know, like, if it follows any particular style. So I just write poetry. Like, I just feel like it pours out of me. I was when I dreamt of writing a poetry chapter, I was gonna call it the outpour, because that's how
Mm.
I feel. Like when I write my poetry, it just pours out. And so I would say that's the one that is just very, very personal in a way. My short stories are usually for things I really want to tease out in a short form. The novels I spend longer time with. My picture books, I started writing because I work with children, and I wanted a book. I think the very first one was about an anxiety, and because I've always had anxiety all my life, and I wanted a book that when I was a child that I would have enjoyed reading and
Mm.
understanding what anxiety is, and what like giving it a name, and naming it, and why is it so, what you can do about it.
Mm.
And so yeah, so that's, I don't think I can't choose, because they all, I feel like when I write them, I use different parts of my brain.
Right.
Yeah, because through different lenses, right? Yeah, so I don't know, I can't choose, but poetry is just that one thing that's been with me the longest, I would say. Um,
Yeah, I love what you said about writing from different parts of your brain. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, and then we were talking just before we hit record here. I was saying to you about how I was so impressed by how you seem to have it all, because you do a lot of things, and you gave this beautiful analogy of you have different balls, and you have a plastic ball, and some of them are rubber balls, and some of them are glass balls. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Okay. So earlier before we started the show, we talked about, when Lola said, "Oh, you seem to have it all," and I said, "No, I don't." And I said, "What I've had to do in my life is people will say you have a lot of balls in the air," and I said that is true, but I've had to figure out which of those balls are glass balls, which of those balls are rubber balls, and which of those balls are plastic balls. And the glass balls are the balls that I cannot afford to let fall because when they break, so not the sorry the glass, yeah, the glass balls, you can't, when glass shatters you can't piece it back, and even if you piece it back it's a mess. And the rubber balls, if they drop they would bounce, right? There's a chance that you can catch them again. And the plastic balls, they would probably crack, and so they're not like the glass balls, so they're not totally shattered, but then now there's a change. And so that in my life I've had to figure out which of those balls are important for me to keep up in the air, and which ones I can let drop once in a while. And so yeah, so that's how I try to like navigate my days, and to say, okay, which balls do I have to keep up in the air today, and which ones can I let drop, and which ones can't I drop? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so cool and so important for people who are multidisciplinary in nature to remember, because there's a tendency to want to hold everything all at once and not let certain things drop. And we also talked just before we hit record about rest and the importance of just taking a moment to catch your breath before you move on to the next thing. So thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome.
And then finally, this is a question that I ask my guests at the end of the show. How do you stay on the journey of your art?
How do I stay? I try to find joy in it, because I know that if it now becomes all just task driven and there's no joy in it, I like, it's not fun for me. I need to find joy in it. And that's why even in my writing, even though I write heavy things, I try to infuse humor when I can, because that's how I catch my breath. Because I feel like, okay, it's just intense, intense. I'm like, okay, laughter break now. You need a laughter break. And so even during my days, my regular days, I try to find laughter break, something that would be a release for me, because that's the only way. Because I think there's a quote, I'm not so sure, that they said no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, or no joy. There was a quote I think I saw, I can't remember who said it, but that really, that if you're going to try and evoke any, if you're going for the goal is to evoke any emotion in your reader, you have to feel it first. And if you don't feel it, it's very hard to convey it in the writing. And so if I'm trying to write a happy scene, I actually go find music that makes me happy, and I play that music and dance before I write that scene. And if I'm going to write a sad scene, I listen to a sad song and I cry before I write that scene. So I feel like I'm really sad. And I know I'm not the only writer who does that. And I remember that even when I was writing A Good Name, my second novel, and there was a scene I played A Rather Good Blind by Etta James non-stop before I could write that scene. So music is a huge part of my writing, because there's some things that I can't express, but when I listen to other people and I listen to their art, and I read something, or I read somebody else's work. So that's how I think I stay on this art. I try to find joy. I always say, if you want to be a writer, you have to be a reader. You have to read and then you also have to experience life. In the midst of experiencing life, that's when other things happen, right? So sometimes it's just go and just live life, and in the midst of living life, an idea comes, and right, so just live life. It truly is short, so enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's very, very enlightening, very balanced. We've discussed heavy things, but we've also discussed light things, and that's very, very balanced. And I'm so grateful that you've taken this time to come and chat with me today. And thank you for watching or joining our conversation. You can get In Our Own Ways, which is published by Narrative Landscape Press. It's available for purchase through the links in the description box, or if you're watching or the show notes, if you're listening to us today. And here's another reminder to follow, like the show, leave a comment wherever you're watching or listening from, and also to follow on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.